It's early morning here in Melbourne, and in this video, I want to talk about navigating triggers or reminders of past psychotic depressive episodes or episode. So, I'm here on a work conference, and there are a lot of people here that are directly related to my psychotic depressive episode. So there are a lot of people here that at the conference that I worked with at the time I developed my psychotic depressive episode. And so they also featured in my psychosis. So to make it a bit more specific, one of the core themes of my psychosis was that I was a terrible PhD student and that basically small struggles I had, that they were really big and that they really indicated I deserved to go to jail overseas and never see my children again. And so quite really very distressing thoughts. The work environment during my later stages of the PhD were quite toxic in many ways. Not necessarily because of any individual person or because of bad intent, but more so because of the structure of the system and the fact that there are very little supports out there for students struggling with mental health. And even earlier in that process, there are very few supports out there at that point in time. So this is, I'm speaking 5 to 10 years ago in Australian context. There was very little support for PhD students who became parents, especially for mothers. So there was the 3 months leave, but that was basically it. But that's enough about my particular story. The reason why I'm making this video is that I thought it would be helpful for other people to talk about how do I manage these nowadays quite rare situations where I really get confronted quite strongly with my past psychotic experience and I might experience feelings like shame when running into some of these people because of my past experience, and most of these people are aware of that experience. But also, how do I especially deal with people that might be triggers? Not so much triggers for developing psychotic depression, because I feel very healthy, I feel very centered overall these days, but I guess for at least raising my anxiety levels and taking me back to that period a little bit. So what I noticed is that my energy levels have gone down a bit over the past couple of days. My anxiety levels have gone up. And what I do in these situations is to try and be very proactive. So I I have reduced the number of talks, for example, that I will attend at this conference rather than trying to attend every single talk that I would normally go and see. I select the most relevant talks and make sure I have some downtime, have some time away from this, in a way, triggering situation to look after myself, but also to navigate other work tasks that take up time. And that, I guess, the overall conclusion is that I try to manage my stress levels, right? So try to reduce my exposure to whatever the trigger is. When I notice that I'm getting a bit triggered, that it's a bit difficult for me, and try to increase my self-care at the same time. And one kind of quite strict rule that I have developed together with my psychologist over the past couple of years, or quite many years working together, is that if I notice any of this type of stress is really starting to influence my well-being, and not to the degree that I'm developing depression or anything like that, but just it's noticeably increasing my well-being in the short run, I very proactively need to take a little bit of time off work. So whether that's a couple of hours, whether that's a day or a couple of days. I really need to very proactively make sure that I get back to my usual level of functioning, my usual level of energy, so that I can ensure there are no longer term flow on effects, right? So that, for example, I don't get physically unwell because of the stress or because of that anxiety. One thing that I still find very difficult is to give myself permission to do that, even though I know through trial and error that that works really well. Having some downtime, taking a step back, removing myself a bit more from triggering situations. I often have quite high standards, and I would guess that that applies to a lot of people who develop psychotic depression, that we want to do well, we're high achievers, we aim to please in many ways. So that is really a skill, taking care of myself proactively, and in that process potentially disappointing a couple of people or having to renegotiate some deadlines is really still a learning curve for me. Other things that I try to do is ensure I get good sleep. So sleep is really important for my well-being. Try to connect socially with friends and family and get a bit of fresh air, get a bit of exercise. So yesterday I felt quite exhausted and quite stressed, but I did make sure I at least took a little walk to the supermarket. So this is absolutely not a big type of exercise or anything like that, but just going out, getting some fresh air, having a bit of movement in my day. Another thing that I did is schedule an appointment with my psychologist, who is always super supportive, and that's very helpful, and talk these things through. And generally speaking, she is the voice of self-compassion and kindness in my case. So the reason that I'm sharing this story and the experience of having some heightened anxiety over the past couple of days is to hopefully help some of you or some people you might know or that you might care about in normalizing this. It's very understandable, very normal that reminders of your psychotic depressive episode are very triggering, that they are accompanied by anxiety, by reduced energy levels, etc. And that doesn't mean that you're experiencing a relapse per se, right? This is a very understandable reaction to a very traumatic experience. It is important, though, to manage this proactively and find what works for you to navigate these instances successfully, because you will, even if you try to avoid them most of the time, you will run into them situations where you're exposed to triggers every now and then.